This is quite funny. I've never told anyone this, but there was a site in Guam. You know where Guam is? She just said, if that's where your heart is, then do it and I'll support you. Just let us know. Let me know if I have to adjust the weekly budget. So this is the super tax that's unrealized gains at $3 million if you have $3 million of super money in your super fund. Yeah, and the government will tax you 15% of unrealized gains. There was one of my colleagues was here yesterday shooting. We bought her a property. It was the first investment property last year in Townsville. We bought it for $350. Right? This is in 25th of June last year settled. What are we now? We're like the 24th of May. It's not even a year yet. She had it revalued 3 months ago for $490.
Welcome back to Faithfully Invested, a program brought to you and powered by the MCCA Income Fund. Today, brothers and sisters, we have a special guest, a dear friend of mine and brother, probably I would say the best buyer's agent I've ever dealt with, brother Abdullah Nouh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah.
How are you, Habibi?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Alhamdulillah.
We also have my dear brother Suhail.
I'm not talking today, as you can see. I'm not the one presenting.
All means, yeah.
No, all the blades. You know, today we got to put Adzi under the pump. You know what I mean?
MashaAllah.
So thank you for your introduction.
I've learned from the best. I can say I've learned from the best.
Let's listen.
All I need now is the beanie, a bit of a thicker beard, and to grow some hair by some miracle. Maybe Aiden will fund my trip to Turkey. No, it's a joke. All right, so Abdullah, I wanted to start today's conversation knowing a bit about you. Obviously, we're good friends for a very long time. We've known each other for a very long time, and you've sort of pivoted from like the mining industry and digging up, gold and whatnot. I don't know what minerals you were working on the mines, but to now digging up like amazing property and property that's sort of making your clients a lot of money, inshallah. And I've seen it firsthand with some of the clients that we've dealt with. What sort of made you want to trade in that high vis for high value properties? What was that thought process? What was your mindset behind it? What led to you making that transition?
Oh, well, how much time do we have? Look, I think I really enjoyed what I was doing before. I did 3 years in mining and then 9 years in extractive industries, which is the same application. It's just digging rock rather than gold and diamonds. I really enjoyed the leadership aspect and working with teams, but it got to a point where I was like getting some really good results for some sites, but the ROI in my pocket was quite low. Like I was burning a lot of hours and just pushing through. It was just hustling for a company. And I've always been intrigued and I always loved property. I went to WA initially so I can get into the market when I was 19 years old. And I worked for 3 years to try and I felt like that was the only way for me to be able to save a deposit as quickly as possible and buy, a few properties. And it certainly did help me. And then coming back, starting a family, I noticed just before COVID, I did get an opportunity to go and run a site. This is quite funny. I've never told anyone this, but there was a site in Guam. You know where Guam is?
I actually thought Guam was in like West Africa.
No,
is it in like Mexico?
It's an island. No, it's an island. It's an American island just south of North Korea. It's near like the Philippines and North Korea. It's the largest American base in that.
I actually know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I got a recruiter reached out to me and offered me a role to run their operations, concrete and quarry business. Inshallah. And it was like an American, obviously American. So you get the green card after 3 years and the pay was quite good and they were going to fly the family up and down.
American dollars?
We got past the interview. They offered me to come up and the family to come up, and then lockdowns happened, the first lockdowns.
SubhanAllah.
And we just had to wait. And Melbourne had the most aggressive lockdown, so we had to wait until September to be able to to go back there. But unfortunately, they just couldn't wait. They really needed someone to help them. And this particular company had he ran a monopoly, so he had all the contracts, all the defense contracts, because they got one of the largest American bases there.
Oh.
Anyway, so that was meant to be the plan, but it didn't go ahead. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truly the best planner, because what happened after that was I noticed that during COVID there was a lot of price of property just went up in Melbourne quite significantly. I noticed as well people were finding it really difficult to buy. And I spent probably 4 months every Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. I'd go to the local cafe and just write down, okay, I have an idea. I want to do something for myself. What is it? And it was 4 months. And I did it at 6 a.m. because at 7 a.m. I played soccer with the brothers in Keilor. Anyway, one morning I just come across an ad where you can become a buyer's agent. I thought it was a scam, and then I ended up following through, and this was about 4.5 years ago now. And yeah, and I did the studies, got the qualification, and I took my wife's laptop. I asked her if I can take it. I bought it for her, then I asked her for it back. I never owned a car, so I had to go out and buy a car. I always had a company car. And yeah, and I just basically got in touch with all of my networks. And from day one, I truly believe I added value to everyone's, to every brief I've had.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I remember our first conversation.
Yeah.
And last I remembered you were in the mines, and now you're sort of bringing a model to Australia that I didn't even know existed here.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this guy's either going to epically fail. I remember, I actually remember the thought like that was going through my mind.
Yeah.
I'm like, this guy's trying to bring something that really, like, we haven't tested in locally.
Yeah,
for that.
that's true.
We always see it in America. It's a model that's been, historically proven in the US. And I just kept thinking, like, if Abdullah brings this to our community, I don't know if they're going to see the value in it.
Yeah.
Help us understand, like, what is, like, in terms of a buyer's agent, help our community understand what is a buyer's agent, what's the role of a buyer's agent, and sort of what do you bring to the table? Because I know that you're someone you've pioneered this essentially in our community. No one has done it in our community, right? So help us understand that.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of, now there's buyer's agents everywhere, but when I started, I agree with you, no one knew what buyer's agents were. And not even, I remember telling my wife what I was doing, and she's a great supporter, like fantastic supporter of me.
Inshallah.
She just said, if that's where your heart is, then do it, and I'll support you. Just let me know if I have to adjust the weekly budget. That's what she said. She's such a great woman. Anyway, so I remember early on it was like quite, it was quite tough, but we got through. And I think a buyer's agent essentially is someone that can he advocates for the buyer. So, there's two different types of buyer's agents. There's buyer's agents for owner occupiers, like someone looking to buy a family home. And I've acted on clients for that. Not so much now though, but early on I did. And the second type is investments. The buyer's agent for owner occupiers, it's very much more so like an emotional purchase. But I did work with a lot of relocators, like expats coming back home to Australia, have no idea what Melbourne offers or any of the other states, and then we bring some data and try and understand what they're looking for, and then find the right sort of locations and suburbs and work within the budget that they have. But that's essentially what we do.
So this is something that I wanted to ask earlier, but I have a mate who was looking at becoming a property investor, and for the longest time he didn't know whether or not it was a smarter decision to purchase a home outright. And to purchase a home to live in, or purchase something that would grow exponentially over time, because he didn't see the value in purchasing a property for investment when he was paying somebody else's house off through rent. So obviously there's this concept called reinvesting. Can you please give our audience a bit of a rundown of what that is and how effective that is a strategy?
Oh, I think it's a great strategy. Like my wife and I still practice it. We sort of fell into it because we moved to the other side of Melbourne. But I think reinvest is great because when you buy a home to live in, you're gonna leverage, right? So the ijara or the interest that you're paying against the loan is not tax deductible, right? And all your income's tied into this property that you have to now maintain. When you buy an investment property, you got the whole Australian landscape you can purchase. You don't have to go to the price that you need to, the price of the home is probably going to cost more than the investment property. There's going to be an income coming in, and then you got, negative gearing benefits. You've also got, depreciation benefits, but you got the ability to buy in a high growth market. And there's a lot more, I say, upside in that than buying principal place of residence, because principal place of residence, there's a lot of emotion attached to it. And generally what we find is owner occupiers, they value the building a lot more than the land, right? So you overcapitalize on the building. So if you're buying, say, for example, a house worth $1 million, an investor will buy the house that has a land that's worth 900,000 and the house is dilapidated or just going and it's worth 100,000. Whereas an owner occupier will pay 400 for the land and 600 for the house because it's like a Taj Mahal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, for those who don't know what negative gearing is,
It's
a
gearing
mate of
against.
mine doesn't know. So,
Yeah.
just tell me about negative gearing a little
So
bit.
your net cash position, from holding that property could be like, I don't know, -10. So that's basically your income is your rent, and then your expenses is your interest or jada, and then your holding costs, which is your rates and property management and insurance. So if you're in a deficit, that deficit comes off your taxable income.
Oh, okay,
So if your deficit, say, is 20,000 and your taxable income is 100, then your taxable income now becomes 80. That's
You've-
like a very simplistic way to share it.
So while we're touching on tax, because I know that there's a very big topic right now, it's a bit of a hot topic. A lot of Australians are worried, and we don't know if we should be worried or concerned. Help us understand this super tax. What's everyone talking about this super tax?
Yeah,
Should we be concerned about it? Should the
Not
average
at all.
Australian not at all?
no.
No.
So this is the super tax that's unrealized gains at $3 million if you have $3 million of super money in your super fund. Yeah, and the government will tax you 15% of unrealized gains. So that's for not a combined self-managed super fund. It's for an individual self-managed super fund. So you would have to have $3 million.
Wow.
And like the average Australian doesn't have that.
I don't even know what $3 million looks like, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it's not going to impact most Aussies.
So this is something that I wanted to ask, because I have a mate who's looking at using his current superannuation money to purchase a home as a kind of SMSF. Can you please enlighten us on the conversation to do with that in general? Can you give us a bit about that, and then whether or not that would be a good decision?
Buying an investment property with your self-managed super.
Yeah.
Yeah, with your super money. Yeah, look, I think it's a great way because, so, say let's use two different scenarios, right? Your super money sitting in an industry super fund. What's it returning? Like, what's the average?
Say
return rate?
6-7%.
Yeah. So if you have,
Plus, like you got 0.5% management
so let's
fee.
just say at our age we should have probably about 150k.
Yeah.
So 7% in the next 10 years will give us 300, right? If we have 150k and we hold it for 10 years,
Yeah.
it's 7%, it's 300. Okay, put that 150,000 now into a property worth 500,000, right? So you're going to leverage against it, and that property is earning an income, and you're contributing to the loan, so you should be able to manage the outgoings, right? Now, if that $500,000 property averages 7% per annum over the next 10 years, the end value is going to be, in 10 years' time, $1 million. So you've now turned that 150 into, I'm just throwing like rounded figures here, but that 150 has now become 500, right? Plus minus all the other expenses.
Is that?
So your rates, your cash on cash return is a lot greater,
Yeah.
right? Your cash on cash return on the 150,000 in the first year is going to be about $35,000. Sorry, 35%.
And Suhail, I'll let you know, for your friend that's interested in this SMSF finance, MCCA actually has an SMSF finance products that we've launched, I think it was, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested in financing through your SMSF, feel free to reach out to us or any of our friendly sales staff.
I didn't ask that question for him to do that, by the way.
I don't even think Suhail knows that we have an SMSF finance product, even though he did the marketing. He's done the marketing.
But I think
mashallah,
actually think it's,
great
and
marketer.
I think you opened up with ethical financing,
Yeah.
right? Ethical investing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ethical because like super funds, you don't know where they're investing the money.
Yeah,
right?
exactly
They could be investing in weaponry, in tobacco. Who knows where? Like, I don't know what their portfolios are like, but imagine you have control of actually your super and you put it into bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Now the challenge is, right, it's asset selection. So how do you get that 7% return per annum on the property? Well, 500,000 in Melbourne and Sydney is probably going to buy you an apartment, right? You're not going to get a house.
Yep.
So this is where you need to look outside of Melbourne and Sydney. You need to find markets that are actually going through growth cycles. All you have to do is buy into that market. Even if you just bought and held it, you're going to get a good ROI. There was one of my colleagues was here yesterday shooting. We bought her a property. It was the first investment property last year in Townsville. We bought it for $350. Right, this is in 25th of June last year. Settled. What are we now? We're like the
24th or
24th of May. It's not even a year yet. She had it revalued 3 months ago for $490.
Inshallah.
Right, that's 140k in it was less than, let's just say 11 months today, right? So that's 40% uplift.
So
And that cash on cash return is over 100%.
crazy as well.
It's crazy.
But like for like obviously the average person who's out there not walking around with a buyer's advocate on hand, you know what I mean? Like those opportunities to think outside of the place or the scope that they already know. For example, I grew up in Altona North or Newport.
Yeah.
I'm automatically thinking to myself, wow, the prices went from when my dad bought a house from there back in the day, 50K to about 1.5 mil, 1.4 mil now they're worth. And I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, so the only way for me to make money would be the things that I know.
Yeah.
Now, as a buyer's advocate, how dangerous is that for the common...
It's pretty dangerous. Well, look, if you're going to buy an investment property, most consumers or most buyers feel more comfortable with the places they were either raised in or the places they live in because they know the best street. They'll probably do a better job than a buyer's agent because they know the right streets. They know, where all the better locations are in the suburb. But the problem is whether you can afford to buy into that suburb. And is it the right, like if you're going to invest money, are you going to get the best ROI in that suburb?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like they're going in. A lot of them are going into this without understanding, without the mindset of capital growth.
Yeah.
Without the mindset of I guess expanding their portfolio within their properties that they are purchasing. It's more of an emotional purchase.
Yeah.
I think we discussed it offline earlier, and we've discussed it in the past that when people purchase their first property, it's usually like Suhail was saying in the properties or the areas that they grew up in because that's where they feel the most comfortable. Yeah. Like my brothers and I, we grew up on a farm, right, for a very long period of time. Yeah. And forever and a day, I'm always saying that when I retire, I want to retire on a farm. Yeah. Right. And then you have like the other side that says I want to retire on a beach, because that's where they've grown up, right? So sort of you go back to your roots. I think this is a great segue into the next topic. It's important that we discuss this topic because it's quite hot at the moment, just like the initial question in regards to that the tax. The RBA, they've just reduced the rates. What does that mean for Australians? A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are now starting to think, do we run towards the auctions or do we run towards the hills and duck for cover? What does it mean now that the RBA has reduced the rates? How does it affect the property market? Give us a bit of a rundown if you can.
So I've got a really interesting view on this because RBA increased rates by 13 times up until it dropped, correct?
Yeah.
And the 13 times it went up, my clients experienced an average return rate of like 15% per annum. So RBA rates don't actually impact the property market, right? Because there's markets within markets. What it does is it changes two things, affordability and sentiment, right? So Melbourne is struggling with affordability, so is Sydney. Sydney affordability index, they're talking like 80% of household income goes towards servicing a loan, right? I think CoreLogic issued the other day, it was like 60 something, but even if you said 66%, it's still quite high. It's the highest in the country, right?
Oh.
So what like the reduction in rates, what it will mean, it will impact markets differently. I think Melbourne will probably see the most improvement because sentiment is an issue in Melbourne at the moment. And that's driven by, the taxes that we have, the land. We've got land tax thresholds were changed last year. We're the highest tax state when it comes to property. You got vacant house tax now if it's not rented. You've also got they just changed a new tax rate just today. From the 1st of July coming up, the new levy on commercial and residential has been changed, so you are paying a bit more tax. But I think what we're going to see in Melbourne is with the market really hasn't moved much in the last 4 years. We're seeing a lot more interest now from interstate investors, and we're also going to see a lot more people can afford to buy in Melbourne again. Mm-hmm. I think other states, it just means it's going to open up more buying power in Queensland. Adelaide's got an affordability problem now because it's quite expensive. So I think the only thing rate reductions do is improve affordability, which means you'll have more demand.
I think we had a meeting at MCCA once where one of the brothers from management brought up the fact that Melbourne has become like one of the least expensive cities or capital cities in Australia.
It is, yeah.
Is that currently the state?
Yeah,
right now?
it's the second behind. Well, Darwin's the first in terms of the cheapest capital city, and then Melbourne's number 2.
So, like, how would a place like Melbourne go from being maybe like close to Sydney and almost on par with Sydney to?
Yeah, well, again, I think it just goes back to like there's two functions we look at when it comes to how do you forecast growth. One is supply and one is demand. During COVID, we had exacerbated, our supply was exacerbated. It was low, but it was exacerbated because of the nature of the lockdowns, right? People who wanted to sell couldn't. People wanted to buy couldn't get out of their house to buy. So there was not much stock available in the market. And it was interest rates at the time were below 2%. I think the savings ratio was 22%. We normally sit at 11 to 12%. So people had money in their account. They couldn't leave the house. And there was a lot of FOMO going on in Melbourne, right? So as soon as, the floodgates, as soon as we were free again, able to roam the streets, we saw a lot of supply come into the market. And then at the same time, you saw 13 interest rate jumps, right? And at the same time, our rental market is the cheapest in the country. So if you look at what's changed in the last 4 years, rent has gone from 2.8% yield to now 3.9 to 4.2%.
Yeah.
Right? So rent has gone up, but prices have maintained the same. That's why investors are interested now.
Makes sense.
I think Melbourne also is different to Sydney. Sydney is it's landlocked.
It is.
Melbourne has quite a large urban sprawl. You still got a lot of land in the west and north.
Yeah. So Sydney's, to give a bit of background, Sydney's it's one of those very interesting places geographically speaking because there's very little room in the north and very little room in the east. So you find the predominant population is moving towards the west and the southwest.
Yeah.
Hence why we have new areas coming up in the southwest. Or we did really about 5-6 years ago. You had areas like, Austral and Edmondson Park, all these areas past Liverpool that were growing, but then you're sort of locked because of the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
So the Blue Mountains sort of act as a barrier, like a property barrier, because you can't go further than that. And so even when I was in the east and in the north of Sydney, and I was driving around with some friends late last year, I actually felt like I was in Greece again. I felt like I was in Europe because the road's actually different. The landscape is different. It becomes almost hilly. It's a lot more picturesque. Not saying that the southwest isn't beautiful. You go to, I remember when I went to MCCA, we used to go out to a farm out in the southwest, past Austral and all these places. It's beautiful there. But it's a very different landscape to Melbourne. Melbourne, we can expand, and we've expanded over the years. I remember someone was telling me once when I was a child that the Dandenongs were not actually considered part of Melbourne back in the 50s.
Yeah.
Right. It's only recently that we've now considered Dandenong a suburb of Melbourne. Can we sort of pivot our conversation towards strategy? Because you've helped a lot of people build significant wealth over the years. I know you've been operating now for 4 years with MECCA Property Group. And over those 4 years, I know of people that I've spoken to that you've helped, you've helped them, I guess, from a property and a wealth perspective overall. Talk to us what sort of separates, those savvy investors to those emotionally drained buyers. What can you give us? What insights can you give us in terms of that? What are the do's and don'ts is what I'm saying. Because I've seen your content as well, mashallah. Hey, for those of you that don't follow Abdullah, please follow him on social media.
His links will be below.
So as to how it always says, like, share and subscribe. Is that what it is? Yeah, whatever. Comment, whatever it is.
Share
you guys know what we're talking about.
Share it as well,
Yeah, some I don't know. So follow Abdullah because some of his content is very educational and it is very, I've learnt a lot myself, even someone that's worked in the finance and investment space now for well over 14 years. So I would recommend that everyone that does watch this do follow his content.
So your content, for example, the one that you put out recently with the flooding stuff.
The flood zones.
I never thought that was a thing. For me, I was just like, we bought a house. There's a park there. There's a school. Alhamdulillah. It's going to go up in price. Yeah. That's literally all I used to think. And then you're telling me about a tree. Then you're telling me about a flood and a power line.
So this is the time that you talk to us about the do's and don'ts.
Okay, I'll tell you now. All right. So look, when it comes to buying, building a strategy or buying an investment property and you're looking for growth, there's a lot of people will say location, right? But they never actually tell you what does that actually mean, right? Because what does location mean? So there's 4 layers I look at, right? I'm going to really dumb it down for you. The first one is what city are you buying in? Mm-hmm. So when we look at city, where is it in the growth cycle phase? I'll give you an example. Adelaide's doubled in value in the last 4 years. It's probably not a good time to get in now. It would have been better 4 years ago, right? Yeah. So what city are you buying in? And you look at infrastructure, you look at affordability, you look at the economy. So if you follow the economy, generally housing follows through, right? So you want to look at the GDP or GSP for that city. You want to look at unemployment rate, job advertisements, what infrastructure projects, and infrastructure per capita. So what's the infrastructure spend So if they're going to spend $100 billion and there's X amount of people, what is the spend per person, right? And compare it against the other cities. Then you've got, so what city are you buying in? The next one is what region within the city. So if we use Melbourne as an example, you got 3 regions in Melbourne. You got the west, you got the north, and you got the east and southeast 4, right? West has got a lot of land. I wouldn't touch that, especially out of west. It's just too much land supply. Then you go north, you're pretty much okay up until you hit Roxburgh Park, Craigieburn, right? And then after that, there's a lot of land. East is landlocked because it's wedged. You got like all those hills and we've got a lot of rural conservation land in the west. And then you got Dandenong Mountains in the far east. So you sort of stop at Baronia. And then you got Ferntree Gully in east, and then you got southeast. And really the only land in the southeast is Pakenham. So you got to look at like land supply. So how much available land is there? Is that going to impact the value of your property? And within that region, have a look at the economy as well, like what's happening, what's the unemployment rate, what's the demographic of that area. So number one, you've got city, then you've got region, then what suburb within that region, right? So in Merribeck City Council, if you had a budget of 800,000, where are you going to buy, right? Or 900,000. So you want to choose a suburb that's got more owner occupiers than investors, because owner occupiers really know how to drive value into a suburb. They care about education for their kids. You know, they mow their lawns, they renovate their homes. You know what I mean? And then the last one is what street within that suburb are you buying in? Are you going to buy in a street that's across from a highway? Are you going to buy from a street that's got, you can see a high voltage power line in front of you? So you want to be buying in a street that's got a nice treescape, it's got nice parking. You don't want to be across from a school, you don't want to be on a main road with a lot of noise. So that's the 4 layers that I normally break it down in. Yeah. And if you can master these 4, then you can essentially just buy and you just hold it for the next 5 or 10 years.
So what you're telling us is from that list, someone can basically like predict in their own capacity, like whether or not the purchase that they're making for a home right now is going to be a good decision in the long run.
Correct.
So if somebody, for example, doesn't take this advice and they say, you know what, I have a good gut feeling about this place, how silly would they be?
Well, the gut feel is based on their personal experiences, right? That's where gut feel comes from. It's like all the inputs you've had over time. So you'd have to ask why they gut feel. If they're developers and they're telling you their gut feel, then I'd probably maybe agree. Yeah. Like I've got a gut feel when I look at a property, I can tell you if it's good or not. But that's because I'm working in property.
Abdullah from MECCA Property Group. So it's a different
on that topic.
I just have lactose intolerance. That's it.
On that topic, so like I've actually sat with Abdullah, and like we've discussed this heavily, right? We've travelled together and whatnot. I remember once we're sitting in Sydney, I think it was, in Bankerstown.
ما في غيره.
ما في غيره. أحلى علم. And Abdullah was actually telling me, and he was showing me the data behind the decision making that him and his team make, and the investment that MECCA Property Group actually engage in. Like their investment in this data is significant. This isn't sort of like someone sitting behind a desk that I think is just looking at different areas on Google Maps and thinking, okay, well, this area, is sort of has a bit of land behind it. They're going to develop it soon, so therefore the area before it would start to increase in value once that land is developed. It's not that simple. We're talking about say it again. We're talking about population migration. We're talking. There we go. Oh, this guy. Not bad.
I'll say
So we're talking about population migration. We're talking about a number of different factors here that they have all the data behind it in order to make these decisions or help you make these decisions to purchase the property. It's very informed. It's not a. This isn't sort of a case
we
of
base it off facts.
Yeah, like
not
I had a coffee today and I was at a park and I sort of had this intuition and this gut feeling that I want to go buy.
I think that's what sets us apart. Like I never tell a client I feel this is good.
Yes,
it's like these are all the metrics we work off.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of platforms out there that anyone can get subscriptions to that tells you what information you want of a particular suburb, like DSR and. There's SQM, there's heaps, right? And a lot of buyers agents use them. So we actually buy the raw data. We get the raw data in and we have access to like 10,849 suburbs to be exact. And then we base it off regions and we can track essentially what inventory levels, like what is the supply level for that region. How long does it take to sell a home? We can trend it back for 15 months. We can look at how long does it take to lease out a property. You can look at how long rental property, what is the vacancy rate? Like what's the percentage of rental properties that are actually vacant in that suburb? So if you base it off all these sort of parameters, then like the only outcome that could happen is growth. Now, what are you going to get? You're going to get 10%, 15, 30. Well, that depends on a few other factors, like how early are you in the market. It depends on what type of property we get as well.
Yeah.
So for me, as somebody who's not actually like,
You know,
For a friend, Sus.
for a friend, sorry, my apologies, yeah, my mate. So for someone like my mate who's not really that informed, and sometimes they think to themselves, can the numbers be wrong? Have they been wrong before?
no. Well, it's like if you're basing a decision, it's not, again, it's like you're working off, well, they haven't been wrong for us, right? But
Mhm.
you're working off like actual data.
Yeah.
So the numbers, like there's enough information out there that you can like tell if the data is,
Yeah.
you know, not looking right.
You would have the insights.
And we'd have the
You would
insight,
know
yeah.
because the metrics, for example, when I was working at the National Australia Bank, I worked there for 7.5 years. One of the longest, like my longest tenure at the bank, I worked in mortgage recoveries.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now that, brothers and sisters, that's a very nice way of them saying mortgage
Yeah.
repossession. I'm just joking.
He's a debt collector. Guys.
I
He
was
used
a
to
debt
put it on
collector.
people, bro.
No, there was actually
Baseball bat.
with this area of the business, I have to give it to Australian regulations.
Mm-hmm.
It's very regulated, yeah. So, and not just that, more often than not, it's or in all times actually, it's in the best interest of the financial institution to work with their clients in that sort of situation.
Yep.
So work with them over a period of time, no matter what position they're going through in terms of long-term or short-term hardships. There's exit strategies that they can implement, and there's things that they can do to help the client that's going through that period of hardship. We came across, you can say like it was a chaotic time, right? This was a real scary time in Australia.
Was that
Specifically-
2018
I think it was
during the Royal
no,
Commission?
it wasn't during the Royal Commission. I was actually MCCA by then. And alhamdulillah, I made that switch to the right side of the fence, all right? So yeah, the grass was greener on the other side, alhamdulillah. Not because our logo is green, but yeah, you know how it is.
Brandy.
Yeah. What I'm getting at is that the scary time was when the mining boom had stopped, and these
Oh,
single
20
industry towns
Yeah.
experienced. So there was these single industry towns, right? So
Yeah.
these single industry towns, they experienced something that no one ever anticipated,
Yeah.
right? And so what people did is that they were buying into these areas,
Yeah.
right?
The rent was
Because
good.
you're renting a property for $900 a week, Sus. So these houses that are worth like, they've bought them for $300,000-$400,000, they're renting them out for $950 a week because the mining companies need their miners to have a house, right? You think about it, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, no more mining. It's a single industry town. It's only relied, and Abdullah was talking about this, when they look at the metrics, how much infrastructure is there in the town or in
Yeah.
the suburb?
Yeah.
Right.
How
So-
diverse is the economy?
Naam, yes. So these single industry towns, all of a sudden, you're getting $950 a week, bro. You're now like, you're positively geared. Yeah?
Yeah.
You're positively geared. You're kicking goals, right? Your financial institution is saying, you know what, we'll lend you at 90%. We'll
Yeah.
lend you we'll lend you at 95%, right? But then essentially what's happening is they've gone from $950 a week to now earning less than, this is no joke, less than $200 a week. Bro, imagine you're having a rental income of $900, $950 a week. Now you're $200 a week.
Was this like what happened in Detroit?
I'm
Like
not-
they had the
yes,
Ford.
because of the motoring. Yes,
Yeah.
the motoring. Yeah, I think you're right. The motoring manufacturing sector, it collapsed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But listen to this, yeah. Wallahi, we had people at the bank not saying, guys, I'm in financial hardship. Hey, guys, just, bit of a tough time. Bro, people went into their local branch, handed in their keys and said, Salam alaikum. Like, what do you mean, Salam alaikum? I don't want the house anymore. Because you can't pay that back. You're going to sell your house that you bought for $500,000, $600,000. Now you're selling it for $200,000. Because
Yeah.
your house, your value of your house is also highly dependent on your rental yield. Yeah.
And this is what happened in, you could say in Townsville between 2012 to 2018. Property prices went down 35%. Perth.
Perth,
When we started buying in Perth in 2021, we were paying the same price as what the vendor paid 20 years ago on one particular property in Greenfields. Greenfields is a suburb. Never forget that property. I bought it for a client who's went with MCCA. We bought it for $353, and he paid $324 20 years ago. and he only paid he put it on the market because he just wanted to get his money back that he put in 20 years ago. Little did he know that the market was going to shoot up, but
Wow.
yeah,
That's great.
So
but crazy. Like and then this is where, if the economy that you're buying in is focused too much on one industry, being mining or tourism, you can expect a downturn, and downturn happens when, think of it this way: if the economy is regressing, people are losing their jobs. Who's going to hang out in a small town? They're going to go back to the big city, right? So people leave, houses become vacant, the value of property goes down. Why Melbourne and Sydney and these other sort of major cities have held prices and returned well is because they're big. We get all the migration in, and we have a big economy.
So that kind of like makes sense to me, because like, for example, and with like obviously culminating everything else that you've said about, like, for example, the place not being able to like create any more houses in that space, and the area actually pretty much kind of like wrapping up. Like, for example, in Melbourne, there's an area called Brooklyn that's right next to like Altona North, Newport, and Spotswood and Yarraville. Yarraville, I don't see a lot of construction happening. There's not a lot of like new places being built, any places being knocked down, but there's a lot of it going on in Brooklyn. And Altona North is pretty much towards the end of that. So like when I see that, I kind of understand that there's not as much potential anymore in growth. Or am I misreading this?
You're misreading it.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So look, some of our clients, by the way, that have bought properties and have done very well, their properties they're not actual subdividable properties, right? It's purely based on how much supply there is versus how much demand, and what's driving the demand and what's driving the lack of supply. So these are the metrics you look at. But if you were to buy a house in, say, Brooklyn, the property that has the land, the 600 plus square meters that you can subdivide, the value of that property will continue to go up as there's more developments, because people see value there's a market for these duplexes or townhouses, right? But if you bought a townhouse or a duplex as an investment, the value of that won't go as high because there's a lot of incoming supply of that particular asset class in that suburb. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you got to buy the right product.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've got another question. I'm full of questions today.
I knew it. Yeah.
I'm the question guy. They should just put a big question mark on me. Why did they bring this guy here? Subhanallah. So, Abdullah, you're a father of 4, mashallah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
I can imagine your hands are full. You're running a growing business. Allahumma barik. MECCA Property Group, inshallah, goes above and beyond. And I've seen you guys recently traveling all around Australia. I see your content quite often. You're also studying your master's in property, mashallah. Even though you're from a background of commerce, which we have in common, which is good. How do you balance it all, bro? Like, I know that being a dad is a tough job. Being an entrepreneur is a tough job. And then now also studies. How do you manage it all? How do you juggle it all? What's the secret formula?
I think, look, I just have an amazing wife. That's number
Inshallah.
one. She's got a couple of plugs on this show, which is good.
Well, you know what she said? She told me something the other day. She said, Abdullah, he's just buying investment properties for his clients in order to escape changing nappies for the babies.
No.
And I was like, are you being serious? She was like, no, I'm joking.
Look, it's a work in progress.
That's a joke.
So, look, the first 3 years of the business, there was a lot more time that I was putting in, because it was essentially me, maybe plus 1 or 2. But I'm actively now trying to replace myself and make my role redundant within the business. And I've alhamdulillah been able to hire people that have the same values as the company and the same values as me. And I'm being very, very grateful, very lucky that we have such a great team. I think, look, there's some non-negotiables that I have. Like Sundays, I keep it for the wife and kids. I am meant to be home 2 to 3 nights a week for dinner, which I try to be there. But we also live quite far from the city, so we made a big move to the southeast. But it just comes down to your environment. So I've got, we have Coach Mesa, who's our parent coach. She's one of the most unbelievable parent coaches I've ever. Well, not that I've ever worked with anyone else, but she's really good at what she does. Very competent. she's actually helped me and helped Zena, probably more me than Zena,
Sure.
how to like get the best out of my kids, but also like get the best out of myself. So I'm the perfect sort of like, I can be the best version of a dad to my kids. There's a lot of things that I find, us being first generation Muslims here in Australia, our parents came to this country to find security and safety, right? So they didn't have all the tools on how to parent. And I find that sometimes there are things that I'm doing that I'm not proud of that I will need to unlearn, right? And in order to unlearn, that's why I got a coach to help me.
Yeah.
So I
She's
think,
relocated overseas, yeah?
yeah, she's overseas, yeah,
yeah.
but we still work with her.
Yeah, mashallah, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's good. So I think like having her on board, it's made me understand that it's about not the quantity of time, it's more the quality of time you spend with them, and understand like how, every child's temperament, what my temperament is, and then how I can get the best out of every child. I think also just having just a really good supportive team around me, like just having a good family base. And the school which we've taken our kids to is an amazing community down there, Sidra Gardens.
Shout out to Sidra Gardens.
Yeah, shout out to Sidra Gardens. Mate, that is, I'm telling you now, like there's a lot of people are hearing things about Sidra Gardens, and we're like, I would say, the test dummies of this school, right? Because there's no social proof yet.
Correct, yeah.
Right? But as a parent of that school and seeing how far my kids have come as like young Muslims, being able to be confident in the skin that they're in, like they're doing things that I've never done. Like for example, I was telling you this before. They went on a hike last year for 4 days, 4 nights, 5 days, with a full hiking backpack, tent. Like I've never walked into a hiking shop to buy this for myself.
This is the kids?
The kids with the
How
stairs
old
online.
are these kids?
Huh?
How old are these kids?
My daughter, so it was grade 3 and grade 3 and grade 5. I think it was 4, 5, 6.
Allahu Akbar, man.
Yeah, so my
4
daughter was in-
days?
4 days, 4 nights and 5 days.
Is it Omar Hanifa?
No, it was Says Ammar.
Oh, it says Ammar.
Yeah.
Ah, mashallah.
He took him from one side of the. My daughter explained to me. They took him from one side of the mountain to the other, right? And every night they slept in a different spot. Bro, I have never done this in my whole life, bro. Right? They're doing plays. They're doing it's like, actual things that you need, tools that you need to be able to succeed in.
Yeah.
So I actually believe once this product, whoever finishes this school, inshallah, we get the opportunity to finish. It'll be quite interesting to see what type of leaders these kids are going to be. But yeah, I think that as well has helped bring
So the
balance.
support system, support system,
is very important.
You're saying specifically the school as well.
I'd say the school. I'd say my wife. I'd say having good coaches around me.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, we have this mindset in Melbourne, and I don't know if it's anywhere else, but in Melbourne specifically, that we grew up in the northwest, we'll never move to the southeast.
Yeah.
Like I'll give you an example. Yeah, my older brother, his wife is from the southeast. And I remember when he was getting to know her, I said, Habib, like she's from the southeast, bro.
Yeah.
It's not that we have anything against the southeast, but it's about
It's a long drive.
It's a long drive. He said, bro, I'm not moving there. I said, all right, too good, yeah, understood. So when we grew up in the northwest, we have this mindset that we'll never move to the southeast, ever.
Look,
And subhanAllah, like you've made the move. I know a few other brothers, like AK, a few of the other brothers have made the move, right? Even some people are moving to far north Queensland because of Mareeba, right?
Yeah, Mareeba,
we all know about the
mashallah.
Mareeba situation, right? A lot of people have been thinking about it. There's that tafkir, yeah. There's that thought process that people want to move to North Queensland.
I'm not involved in
This
this.
is
This is maybe a bit different. Even I've had that inclination. The only reason why I haven't is probably because I won't have a support system, in terms of, with me and my situations. But nonetheless, there is that thought now that, should we be moving to the southeast because of that school?
It's a forest school.
It's a forest school, yeah. I was actually in a meeting this morning with Mohammed for a good solid hour, and we've been speaking on the phone throughout the day. So it's good. It's mashallah. It's awesome that they have that support system. That's beautiful.
Yes, I think that's probably and I think always also maintaining, like, you have to be grounded with your values as well. I find that when you get into business and when you start to get, I think you both are quite well known, but when you start to get your face out there, you get a lot of like opportunities, or people you can get caught up in the shiny object syndrome. I find so making sure you always maintain your core values, and your deen's very important. Like there's times where I'm driving into work, and like most days, like anxiety is something that's just part of life. I would feel like anxious and driving and going, oh, like it's gonna be, getting ready for the day ahead, right? But like I wouldn't, read a specific dua 7 times. That would like just take that whole pressure away.
Do your morning adhkar.
Yeah, it's like the morning adhkar, like the morning like preparation is very important.
Yeah.
Wake up at 5, just have that time, in darkness, and do your Fajr Salah, and then break away after that. I find the most amount of barakah is in the morning.
I feel like this is something that I really appreciate about Abdullah, and it's something I'm learning about him more. It's just the fact that, like, I feel like you don't pretend to know things you don't know. But like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people that fake it till they make it. So they'll, for example, like even being a buyer's advocate, for example, you would see a lot of those type of people who'd fake it until they made it, and then they probably never do make it. And subhanAllah, like for example, you going to a parent coach, it's probably unheard of to anybody.
Man.
In our like our circles. And for example, having a mentor in your social media for your branding and your content.
Shout out to Shaib. I love that guy, mate.
He's been on our podcast twice, mashallah.
Yeah,
Absolute legend.
Mashallah.
Mashallah.
So like we like subhanAllah, I feel like there's something to be appreciated here in the fact that mashallah, like you'll say, like if I'm not good at a specific or particular thing, I will take it to somebody who does. And you can see that subhanAllah in the way that you carry yourself in your own industry in MECCA, for like working, like obviously being the founder of MECCA Property Group. It's like, in essence, it's like you don't know what you're doing, go to somebody who does.
Yeah, that's right. You have
ask
to.
the people of knowledge.
Yeah,
Exactly.
after people ask to be, and I think that's probably the biggest success I've had. It's just like getting the right people around me, getting the right team, and then just take it like just don't be too ambitious, but just take it as it comes.
But you have to be ambitious. Like in general, your industry, like it was unheard of 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Subhanallah.
Yeah, it was. Subhanallah. And when it comes to buyers agents, you make an interesting comment because there's a lot out there now, right? And anyone that like wants to work with a buyer's agent, I'd say it's like really important to actually know the person you're working with. So like, what have they done? Like, what strategies do they have? Because I find a lot of buyer's agents now, they just buy in hot markets, but there's no exit strategy. Or they're not actually understanding how to build a portfolio. Because, if I have a client that comes to me and says, I want to retire in 10 years and I want an income of $15,000 a year, right?
It's a completely different strategy.
Yeah, I'm not buying them 5 houses.
Yeah, no.
I'm buying them a commercial property that's going to yield them 6% today, and we're probably going to spend $3 million, so that in 10 years' time he could sell his business, pay off the debt, and he's got passive income.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got an asset that's growing.
Have you ever helped someone purchase a property, for example? So we talked earlier about super. I know we're going back sort of into the deep conversation, but have you ever sort of helped someone? I know that it's a common tactic that business owners, for example, would buy an established facility, like a commercial facility we're talking about now, like a factory or a warehouse, through their SMSF, so that they actually rent it back to their business. Their business is renting it off them. So for me, I find that's a really good strategy for someone. So do you want to?
If there's a small business and you have money in your super, I will always tell them like buy the property yourself, and then rent it back. Yeah,
it's like a cycle.
That way.
Wow.
That way you sort of But super is interesting because there's like 3 asset classes that every investor has access to, right? Number one, you got foundational assets, right? Just think of like your Preston, Preston, Northcote, Essendon sort of home. It grows every year. Doesn't matter what's happening to the market. There's always demand for properties in these areas, right? Because of prestigious school or the location, distance to the city. They generally cost more than $1 million. They yield like 3 to 3.5%. So very costly to hold. Then you got your second type of investment properties, which is momentum. So momentum assets are like trading assets. It's like your Perth, Adelaide, where they were 3 years ago. Historically, they don't grow. There've been a lot of volatility historically, but where the market is now and where we're predicting it going over the next 5 to 7 years, we're predicting a lot of really good return on investment. So they're called momentum assets. They're usually worth like 400 to 700,000, and they yield like 4.5 to 7%. And then you've got your passive assets. Passive is like high income based properties, right? So think of commercial, industrial. Think of like a block of units, right? You want to go. It's mainly just high income, right, properties. So wherever you are in your life cycle, like if you're a first time investor at 25 years of age, you'd probably have the appetite to go for momentum-based assets, right? Because you can buy at the lower price point, high yield, and just like create equity, recycle, keep building, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in your early 50s and you've got a couple of foundational properties being your home and another investment, because that's what most people in the early 50s have, you probably need to start pivoting to passive investments where it's like, okay, we need to buy an industrial warehouse, because industrial property still gives you a good return.
With industrial, the tenant is also paying the outgoings.
Yeah.
They're covering a lot more costs than what they would.
You just get the net rent.
So, like for example, when we have a rental property or an investment property that we're renting out, that's residential. The client or the tenant doesn't pay the council rates, right? Doesn't pay any of these additional costs. That's that's on you as a landlord.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. With the commercial property, obviously they have to pay the whole thing, mashallah. So, yeah, maybe we're looking to buying a warehouse soon, inshallah. I'll definitely come to you for some advice. I think there's beautiful synergies between MECCA Property Group and MCCA, not just because of the name, yeah, because we've got MECCA and the old school. Suhail was talking earlier. He's from the inner west. So a lot of the initial clients of MCCA were from the inner west, that Newport, Altona area. It's always been a stronghold of MCCA, inshallah, it stays that way forever and a day. And so they refer to MCCA as MECCA, right? So there is that beautiful affinity between MECCA, MCCA, and MECCA Property Group. And we have worked very closely. We've spoken earlier how you and I have worked very closely. You work very closely with all of our managers across the various states and across all of our branches Australia-wide. Why do you think that affinity is there? Why do you think there's that commonality between MECCA Property Group and MCCA?
I think it's like your brand is, you're one of the original Islamic finance Sharia compliant lenders, right? So you have a pretty strong brand and reputation in the space. And I would say when I'm working with clients, we become quite intimate in the relationship. They ask me for advice on where I should go. I'm not an Islamic scholar, I can't tell them, but I always tell them I'd probably go with the one that's been in the industry the longest, because it generally means that their systems and processes and they're probably the most compliant. I don't know. That's what I sort of say to them. But I find that there's really good connection because it's quite competitive now. I think Islamic finance now compared to 10 years ago has come a long way. I think it's, I think the average Muslim can actually buy a property now. You can do it with 10% now as well with LMI. And I think it's also like our community. I'm trying to, we were given this mindset that us Muslims need to have one house and not be too greedy and just pay it off and, just be okay and content with what you have. But I'm actually challenging that mindset, the status quo, and saying, no, that's not good enough. You actually need to be self-sufficient, right? You need to. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of our community, right? They go and invest in these Ponzi schemes of buying a block. Some guy buys a block of land in the West. I don't know what it was called, but I've seen it on the news recently. And they go, it's sold as a Sharia compliant product where it's only cash. And they put in their super, they put in their savings, they rely on some other business to execute this project. And then what happens? They end up borrowing money, and then that's what happened with that project, right?
Yep.
I don't know what it's called, that's why I can't name it. But
I won't name it, but it's essentially what you're saying is like they went out and they took all these loans against this property.
Yeah.
We're talking about
and then it folded.
And
so I'm actually teaching my community, you can actually do this yourself. You have the capacity to do it yourself. These are doctors and people within our community that actually have jobs that can actually service a loan.
Yeah.
Go out and do it yourself. You've got a lender that is Sharia compliant, and you've got a business that can provide you a service to buy the property. Use them together, and then that's how you propel.
I want to interject here, right, and say I love what you've just said, because we know that as Muslims, we don't buy in order to hoard. Yeah. So the whole theory around, and we talk about it a lot, the dunya and fighting your nafs and all that sort of stuff. And you've touched on that. And you're not fighting that mentality. You're not fighting that that principle, right? So that principle we know exists, and we believe in it, and this is part of who we are as human beings. And we have to be aware of this danger.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're safeguarding or you're future proofing. You're safeguarding our children's future, because you're saying that essentially one isn't enough. If you have the capacity to buy more than one, do it. I know that I don't want my kids, inshallah ta'ala, to go through the same struggles that we have had to go through in order to purchase property. Right, had our parents bought 15 properties, would be in a much better financial situation. Now, they had their own situations altogether. There's a roof or their circumstances were completely different to ours. So that's no, sort of, you can say, anything towards their way in negative light. Very positive, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
However, we have an opportunity, and that's what you're saying, is that we can help our children, help the future generations to come, because we don't want to end up in a situation, and we all know that it's going to end up like this one day, where our children can't purchase properties. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
I think I watched a video recently where someone was talking about how when they purchased a property in Australia, back when they were in their 30s, I think this person was in their 50s now, it was the mortgage was 3 times their income, their annual income. They're now saying it's now on average 8 times.
Well,
by the time our children are in their 30s.
Yeah.
Susie, you don't have any children yet.
But this is why, like,
it'll
you
be a
know,
lot more than
I
that.
feel sorry for him already.
Yeah, exactly right. So now's the opportunity, is what you're saying, Abdullah.
yeah, well, the option, I think, if you can't buy your own home, right, rent where you want to live, and go buy an investment property that's
Yes.
in a much more affordable price pocket that you can hold, and just build the wealth, like that 150 that you put into that investment. If we use the same method, 150 into that $500,000 property, and that $500,000 property the average growth rate in Australia is 6.86% per annum over the last 30 years. That's the average growth rate. Now, there are some areas that have gone south, and but if you just follow those fundamentals I said before, city, region, suburb, street, then you're going to have to at least meet that average. So if you meet that average, then you doubled your money in 10 years. And 10 years goes quick.
That's right.
No doubt. I think we'll wrap it up.
We got a good question.
We've got a good-
We have to always ask at the end of it.
All right, well, you go for it.
You're forgetting already. This
Oh,
guy's been out of the...
He's been out of it,
There you go. It's been a while,
He's,
guys.
I rattled him with the intro. Now he can't do the outro. We always ask all of our guests this one last question. Just to keep it short and sharp in a nutshell, we ask all of our guests, what's one piece of financial advice you would give? Because obviously we're at MCCA, we're a finance organisation, you know what I mean? So we always ask, so for example, some people will say, stay away from debt. Some people will say, buy land because God's not making any more of it, that kind of stuff. So I would ask Abdullah Nouh of MECCA Property Group, what is one piece of advice that you've received or that you would like to impart on the audience before we leave?
Well, there's good debt and bad debt. Right, bad debt is holidays, credit cards, cars, lifestyle, right? And you need to have lifestyle. There has to be some of that. There's a really good book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? And I'm just going to share a case study, and it actually is exactly what the book teaches you. So I had a client that had 150K, 160. We went and bought them 2 properties, one in Perth and one in Townsville for 360 and 375. 360 was valued recently for 585, and the 375 was valued at 595. Right, so they made about 400K. Well, they had the ability to withdraw 400K in equity, right, after 2 years. We used 180 to buy another property, right, in Northern Territory, and the other 220, they bought 2 cars. They bought a Tesla, and they bought, I won't say the other model in case they're watching, but they bought 2 cars, 2 nice cars, right? And that's great. That's good because that's exactly like you're growing your portfolio, but you're also you've got a lifestyle that you can sort of fund with that. So there's good debt and there's bad debt. Try and follow good debt. You can still fund your lifestyle. And I think if you follow those 4, if you just look at location, I think that's critical, those 4 rules that I've mentioned. And then red flags, do your due diligence on a property that you're going to buy. Like, don't skip the DD process. So get a building and pest inspector to inspect the property. There was a bargain that we went to yesterday in Craigieburn last night. We were like high-fiving each other in the office. Oh, this is a steal. We're going to get it. Anyway, we went there to have a look at it. It was riddled with termites.
Oh, wow. In Craigieburn.
In Craigieburn.
And then new, I'm guessing it's the new side?
No, it was the old side.
It was the old
just
side?
next to
Okay.
the shopping
Alright.
centre. It was off market.
Okay, fair enough.
The agent's like, and this agent doesn't like selling stuff off market. Everything. And I was like, something not right here. This agent loves taking shit, like stuff to market. Anyway, we went there and it was riddled with termites. I had my building inspector with me because we had to make a quick decision. and we're actually going to buy it for one of our colleagues. So I like to help my team members in the office. Alhamdulillah, everyone's bought a property, through the knowledge that we have. Anyway, had termites through it, so we cancel it. So do your DD, but when you do your DD, building and pest inspection, just talk to the builder, because when you read that building inspection report, it can seem like the world's going to end, but just talk to the inspector, because most of the time it's okay. Red flags, just look for environmental hazards. Don't buy around any high voltage power lines. If you're buying in a flood zone, just understand what that flood zone is. It will cross from an actual river, or is it just like a flood inundation area that council's putting in because they want, houses to go higher. I'd say also main roads versus inside streets. Don't buy in front of a school. Just try and do your DD. I think you can't go wrong.
Now I'll give you the piece of advice, or to everyone actually a piece of advice. If you are going to purchase a property and you did want to engage with a buyer's agent, MECCA Property Group is available. Abdullah and his team do an amazing job. I can speak firsthand from many clients that we've dealt with, from many friends that I've spoken to, and from my own dealings with Abdullah over the years, that they are a professional organisation, and an organisation that really looks into the property for you and helps you make those informed and correct decisions. And then, if you need financing for the property, feel free to come to MCCA, Australia's leading finance provider. And if you're not ready to buy a property, then this program is powered by the MCCA Income Fund. So feel free, inshallah ta'ala, to look at investing your funds in the MCCA Income Fund and grow your savings until you have enough money to purchase that property. Abdullah, Nouh, I want to thank you. Jazakallah khair. Your time is valuable. So we appreciate your time and we appreciate you coming. Sus, I really appreciate you coming as well. It's good to see you, bro.
No problem at all, mate.
MashaAllah. He threw me on the bus a couple of times, but what's a podcast without him throwing me under the bus?
Come on, bro. It's all love, yeah?
It's all love. Allah.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks.